And we did a ton of work. And I gave this sort of epic presentation laying out all the facts. Stock got completely crushed. And we were on our way. And the government actually got interested early on, launched an investigation pretty early, SEC and otherwise. But then a guy named Carl Icahn showed up. And we have a little bit of a backstory. But his motivations here were not really principally driven by thinking Herbalife was a good company. He thought it was a good way to hurt me. So he basically bought a bunch of stock and said it was a really great company. And, Carl, at least at the time, threw his weight around a bit. He was a credible investor, had a lot of resources. And that began the saga.
So he was, we should say, a legendary investor himself.
I'd say legendary in a sense, yes, for sure. An iconic Carl Icahn.
Oh, that's very well done.
So definitely a iconic investor.
So what was the backstory between the two of you?
So I mentioned that I had another period of time where significant business challenges. This was my first fund called Gotham Partners. And we had a court stop a transaction between a private company we owned and a public company. It's another long story. If you want to go there,
I would love to hear it as well.
But it was really my deciding to wind up my former fund. And we owned a big stake in a company called Hallwood Realty Partners, which was a company that owned real estate assets. And it was worth a lot more than where it was trading, but it needed an activist to really unlock the value. And we were, in fact, going out of business and didn't have the time or the resources to pursue it. So I sold it to Carl Icahn. And I sold it to him at a premium to where the stock was trading. I think the stock was like 66. I sold it to him for 80, but it was worth about 150. And I said, look, and part of the deal was Carl's like, look, I'll give you schmuck insurance. I'll make sure you don't look bad. And I had another deal at a higher price without schmuck insurance, but a deal with Carl at a lower price with schmuck insurance. And the way the schmuck insurance went, he said, look, Bill, if I sell the stock in the next 3 years, for a higher price, I'll give you 50% of my profit. Well, that's a pretty good deal. So we made that deal. And because I was dealing with Carl Icahn, who had a reputation for, being difficult, I was, very focused on the agreement. And we didn't want him to be able to be cute. So the agreement said, if he sells or otherwise transfers his shares. And we came up with a definition that include every version of sale, okay? Because, it's Carl. Well, he then buys the stake and then makes a bid for the company. And, plan is for him to get the company. And he bids like 120 a share. And the company hires Morgan Stanley to sell itself. And he raises his bid to 125 and then 130. Eventually gets sold, I don't remember the exact price, let's say $145 a share. And Carl's not the winning bidder. And he sells his stock, or he loses or transfers his shares for $145 a share. So he owes actually our investors the difference between 145 and 80 times 50%. And I had lawyers never like you to put like a arithmetic example. I put like a formula, like out of a math book in the document so there can be no confusion. It was only an 8-page, really simple agreement. So the deal closes and he's supposed to pay us in 2 business days or 3 business days. I wait a few business days. No money comes in. I call Carl. I'm like, Carl, congratulations on the Hallwood Realty. Thanks, Bill. I said, Carl, just want to remind you, I know it's been a few years, but we have this agreement. Remember the schmuck insurance? It's like, yeah. I said, well, you owe us our schmuck insurance. He said, what do you mean? I didn't sell my shares. I said, do you still have the shares? He says, no. I said, well, what happened to them? Well, the company did a merger for cash and they took away my shares, but I didn't sell them. You understand what happened? So I said, Carl, I'm going to have to sue you. I said, sue me. I'm going to sue you. He says. So I sued him. And the legal system in America can take some time. And what he would do is we sued and then we won in the whatever, New York Supreme Court. And then he appealed. And you can appeal like 6 months after the case. We waited to the 179th day, and then he would appeal. And then we fought it at the next level, and then he would appeal. And he appealed all the way to the Supreme Court. Of course, the Supreme Court wouldn't take the case. It took years. Now, as part of our agreement, we got 9% interest on the money that he owed us. So I viewed it as my Carl Icahn money market account with a much higher interest rate. And eventually I won.
What was the amount? Just
Tiny. Now, it was material to my investors. So my first fund, I wound it down, but I wanted to maximize everything for my investors, right? These are the people who backed me at 26 years old. I was right out of business school, I had no experience. And they supported me, so I'm going to go to the end of the earth for them. And $4.5 million relative to our fund at the end was maybe $400 million, so it wasn't a huge number. But it was a big percentage of what was left after I sold all our liquid securities. So I was fighting for it. So we got $4.5 million plus interest for 8 years or something. That's how long the litigation took. So we got about double. So he owed me $9 million, which to Carl Icahn, who had probably a $20 billion net worth at the time, this was nothing. But to me, it was like, okay, this is my investor's money. I'm going to get it back. And so, eventually we won. Eventually he paid. And then he called me. He said, Bill, congratulations. Now we can be friends. And we can do some investing together. I'm like, Carl, fuck you.
You actually said fuck you?
Yes. And I'm not that kind of person generally, but, he made 8 years to pay me, not me, even me, my investors' money they owed. And so So he probably didn't like that. So he kind of hung around in the weeds, waiting for an opportunity. And then from there, I, started Pershing. We had a kind of straight line up. We were up the first 12 years, we could do nothing wrong. Then Valiant, Herbalife, right? He sees an opportunity and he buys the stock. And he figures he's going to run me off the road. And so that was the beginning of that. And kind of the moment, and I think I'm told by CNBC, it's the most watched segment in business television history. Mm-hmm. They're interviewing me about the Herbalife investment on CNBC, and then Carl Icahn calls into the show, and we have kind of a interesting conversation where he calls me all kinds of names and stuff. So it was a moment. It was a moment in my life.
It wasn't public information that he was long on Herbalife?
He didn't yet disclose he had a stake.
Yeah.
But he was just telling me how stupid I was to be short this company.
So for him, it wasn't about the fundamentals of the company. It was just personal.
100%.
Is there part of you that regrets saying fuck you on that phone call to Carl Icahn?
No. I generally have no regrets because I'm very happy with where I am now. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, it's a bit like, you step on the butterfly in the forest and the world changes because, every action has a reaction. If you're happy with who you are, where you are in life, every decision you've made, good or bad, over the course of your life got you to precisely where you are. I wouldn't change anything.
You said you lost money on Herbalife. So he did the long-term battle.
What he did is he got on the board of the company and used the company's financial resources plus his stake in the business to squeeze us. And a squeeze in short selling is where you restrict the supply of the securities so that there's a scarcity. And then you encourage people to buy the stock and you drive the stock up. And as I explained before, you short those coins at 10, they go to 100. You can lose theoretically an unlimited amount of money. And that's scary. That's why we don't short stocks. That's why I didn't short stocks before this. But this was, unfortunately, I had to have the personal lesson.
So how much was for him personal versus part of sort of the game of investing?
Well, he thought he could make money doing this. He wouldn't have done it if he did otherwise. He thought his bully pulpit, his ability to create a short squeeze, his control over the company would enable him to achieve this. And he made $1 billion, we lost $1 billion.
So you think it was a financial decision, not a personal?
It was a personal decision to pursue it, but he was waiting for an opportunity where he could make money at our expense, and it was kind of a brilliant opportunity for him. Now, the irony is, well, first of all, the FTC found a few interesting facts. So one, the government launched an investigation. They ended up settling with the company, and the company paid $220 million in fines. I met a professor from Berkeley a couple of years ago who told me that he had been hired by the government as their expert on Herbalife, and he got access to all their data, was able to prove that they're a pyramid scheme. But the government ultimately settled with Carl because they were afraid they could possibly lose in court. So they settled with him. But if you look at the stock, if we'd been able to stay short the entire time, we would have made a bunch of money because the stock had a $6 billion market cap when we shorted it. Today it's probably billion and a half.
So you left the short position, or whatever that's called,
Covered. We closed it out.
Yeah.
When we sold Valiant, we covered Herbalife. That was the resetting moment for the firm because it would just psychologically, and the beauty of investing is you don't need to make it back the way you lost it, right? You can just take your loss. By the way, losses are valuable and that the government allows you to take a tax loss and that can shelter other gains. And we just refocused.
Can you say one thing you really like about Carl Icahn and one thing you really don't like about him?
Sure. So he's a very charming guy. So in the midst of all this, at the Hallwood one, he took me out for dinner to his favorite Italian restaurant.
Really?
Yeah. When we were in the middle of the litigation to see if he could resolve it. And he offered $10 million to my favorite charity. The problem was that it wasn't my money. It was my investors' money. So I couldn't settle with him on that basis. But I had the chance to spend real time with him at dinner. He's funny. He's charismatic. He's got incredible stories. And actually I made peace with him over time. We had a little hug out on CNBC. Even had him to my house, believe it or not. I hosted something called the Finance Cup, which is a tennis tournament between people in finance in Europe and the U.S. And we had the event at my house. And one guy thought to invite Carl Icahn. And so we had Carl Icahn there to present awards. And again, I have to say, I kind of like the guy. But I didn't like him much during this.
Is there, because at least from the outsider perspective, there's a bit of a personal vengeance here, or anger can build up. Do you ever worry the personal attacks between powerful investors can cloud your judgment on what is the right financial decision?
I think it's possible, but again, I try to be extremely economically rational. And actually, the last 7 years have been quite peaceful. I really have not been an activist in the old form for many years. And the vast majority of even our activist investments historically were very polite, respectful cases. The press, of course, focuses on the more interesting ones. Like Chipotle was one of the best investments we ever made. We got 4 of 8 board seats, and we worked with management. It was a great outcome. I don't think there's ever been a story about it. And the stock's up, almost 10 times from the time we hired Brian Nicholas CEO. But it's not interesting because there was no battle. Whereas Herbalife, of course, was like an epic battle, even Canadian Pacific. So, for a period there, most people, when they meet me in person, they're like, wow, Bill, you seem like a really nice guy. But I thought, but things have been pretty calm for the last 7 years.